Bet on your tiny, tiny castle. Bet on your tiny, tiny dream. Bet on your tiny, tiny businesses. Bet on, bet on, bet on, bet on you. Bet on, bet on, bet on, bet on you. Why you bet on strangers? Strangers pass on through. You should bet on neighbors, cause neighbors bet on you. Your tiny, tiny barbershop. Bet on you. Oh, your tiny, tiny beauty shop.
Hello, this is a live recording of episode 8 of I Like My Tea Sweet, a podcast created by Aysha and I as part of the collective work of TINYisPOWERFUL. Today's episode will be uploaded to YouTube, SoundCloud, and all episodes are accessible at tinyispowerful.com/podcast.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Aysha, one of the collaborators of I Like My Tea Sweet, a podcast experiment focused on issues, topics, and memories related to Charleston and the greater area. Today is the 4th episode of a 5-episode series where we explore the 5 house: mental, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual. We want everyone to get the most out of this conversation, so we would like for everyone to list what comes to mind when you think of your spiritual health. You can respond publicly in the chat or privately in a personal journal. And as always, this is a conversation, so all are encouraged to engage and participate by asking and answering questions with our guest hosts. Today's focus is on spiritual health, and Rain and I are your hosts. To start off, what is your definition of spirituality?
Well, personally for myself, I see it as believing in other forces other than yourself and believing in the power of those other forces and how they impact you and how they impact others.
I think my definition is the same, actually. It really is.
And I guess for me, I just look at the root word, which is spirit. So spirituality, I guess it just is like of spirit in a way. I think that's how I would understand it.
All right. For a really cool question. What's everyone's most treasured memory when it pertains to spirituality or to religion?
I think mine would always have to be like going to church. The times that I do go to church, we typically sing the same songs. Come On in the Room, and what's the other song? What else? What's the other song? And sometimes they'll do Never Would Have Made It by Margaret Snap, and I just remember the band, how apparently everybody can sing. Not in the right pitch, but we can sing together, and like the feeling and the power that you feel from singing together, it just brings like a unity that we all going through the same struggles and like we all gonna make it, things like that.
That is really beautiful, Aysha, thinking about, I have kind of 2 short things. One that your story reminded me of about how like singing together as like a connector was when former President Barack Obama came to Charleston to deliver the eulogy for Reverend Clemente Pinckney after the Mother Emanuel massacre. I was able to attend that eulogy in person. It was in the arena, the TD arena at the College of Charleston, and he sung Amazing Grace. And I remember singing with him, and it was my first time ever, hearing him speak in person and just feeling like, wow, we are sharing breath right now. Like the breath that I'm breathing to sing this song, he's breathing this breath and singing that song. And so that memory just came to me as you were talking. And then the other really most cherished so far in my lifetime would have been when I was in the hospital to give birth to my daughter. I have never felt more connected with spirit than that, that entire, I think I was in the hospital for like 4, maybe almost 5 days. And I knew every minute of that was bigger than me.
I would say for me would be, sorry about the sirens in the background. I would say for me it would be 2 or 3 years ago. My Spanish teacher, she's an MVP. She would take me to her church either every Sunday, every other Sunday, and even though I had converted to a different religion, I still felt very loved and very welcomed there. And it's really cool that you two mentioned the like singing aspect, because I have to say that like gospel music is just so, and I think no matter what religion you are in or what spirituality you practice, is just so relaxing and so uplifting. And that's the feeling I got whenever I would go into church with her. And we'd also like help to prepare the coffee and the food, and it was just like a really uplifting and like nourishing atmosphere. And then afterwards we would they no longer have their location in downtown Spring Street, but we would go to Wildflower and we'd pick up some like huge sticky buns, and that would end our like Sunday morning, you know.
Um, what what encouraged you to take part in spirituality?
I would say that's a sorry.
Go ahead.
I would say that's a difficult question, because as a kid, spirituality was just something that um, people older than me were like, you gotta have this. This is important. I'm growing up in like a Protestant Christian home, you know. Um, I'd be taken to church, um, you know, I'd be taken to my parents' church. Whenever they wanted to go, or to my grandmother's church as a young child growing up. But I never felt a connection to spirituality until I desired or decided to live in the religion that I am in now. I never felt a connection. It was always kind of like there was a mic, but nobody was speaking into the mic. So that like really concerned. I wouldn't say concerning, but that really empty feeling sound of like a mic that's on, but no one's talking through it. And that's how I felt for most of my life up until 4 years ago. So I decided to take part in spirituality 4 years ago, when I decided to change religions to a religion that made more sense and I felt more connected to.
That's a beautiful story. Not story. That's a beautiful answer. I guess similar to yours. Um, I was just raised to believe in God, and in the Presbyterian household, which means like we believe in our elders, and like the elders mean something. Like their wisdom means so much to us and everything with God and things like that. So I think it started when I started being connected to spirituality when my grandmother passed away. And you know, like we cried and we cried and we cried. But then she was a believer of God, and she always told me, whenever I'm feeling down, pray. So I think the night that she passed away, I literally wrote a letter to God and I was like, help me make it through. This is my junior year. I don't know how to make it, but I believe you. And I know you gonna help me push it through. And you gonna help me push it through. And he did, and I think that's what made me connect to God and believe that God is real.
And I think, like both of you, it's been a personal journey, and I'm grateful that I grew up in a household, even though when I was younger, I don't think I fully necessarily understood the going to church and singing the hymns, um, and reading the Bible. I participated because it was part of my upbringing, but in terms of the relationship that I feel that I have now, I don't know if it was any one moment. I think I've been seeking, though, for like my whole life, and seeking to know God, or to know the Most High Creator. That's been a journey of my whole life. I think something that's interesting about this topic, spirituality, is there are so many different ways to understand it, and so many different ways that people talk about it. So I just want to note that's I don't know, it's special that we're creating a space to have this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you for being a part of it. And I guess that can lead into the third question, or fourth question, is spirituality isn't just religion. It could also be practicing yoga and things like that, and like meditating. So my question is, how do you practice? Well, not really how do you practice. What else do you see spirituality for?
I kind of see it as a way to connect people because, when you all have like a common belief, even though it may look different on the surface, um, it's really comforting and refreshing to know that somebody else feels like there's a higher power, or has practices surrounded on that idea that there's a higher power.
And I think what this whole 5 Health series, in part has been to amplify is how it's all connected. So, if we're talking about being physically well, emotionally well, mentally well, just to acknowledge that, a spiritual wellness is, and I guess maybe there, and I never want to ostracize anyone. And so maybe for some, they wouldn't necessarily think of the spiritual aspect of existence as necessary to the whole. But personally, I do. For me, it is necessary to be whole.
I agree with both of you guys with how like what we see spirituality for. I think the only thing I can add is like is spirituality, it gives you like a different perspective of you because you have to go within, and it's like you have to think it in like manifestation, things like that. You really have to think it and believe it, and then slowly but surely you see how that spirituality plays out. Like you've been asking for a miracle, you said, I'm going to get a new job, and guess what? You got the new job. So it's something that's within you. So it's like a different power within you. Like you get to know yourself deeper. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and I actually I listened to a podcast once, and it was talking about just creating good practices, and this was like a practical, tangible, like how to create some practical rituals and routines in your life, and one of those was just the practice of faith, and how having a faith or a strong belief in something, um, according to this podcast, again, was like an essential piece to life. So, and I'm not saying it's 100% right or wrong, because again, when we're in a topic like this, there's so many different ways of understanding it, and there's such a wide spectrum from 100% full belief in anything to zero belief in nothing. And so, and I like to hear all of that. So I think the three of us have in common some understandings of spirituality, but that's not to say that people who don't have it in common wouldn't also be welcome to engage in this conversation. It just so happens that today it's just the three of us. So
I really like that idea and that concept simply because um, being able to believe in something, being able to, it's kind of like being able to rely on something, like knowing that there is something both inside and outside of my being that I can look to for guidance and look to for a sense of belonging even when I'm not around people. It's just really comforting, you know? I think that's a lot of what like spirituality and religion is. It's a sense of comfort and knowing and pursuing, you know?
The other question I had was like, how do you measure your spirituality? Because when I read the question, and I think I wrote the question, might have, I was like, how do you measure spirituality? And I was talking to myself like, how do you do that? So I was wondering, how do you guys do that?
My simple answer is I don't. I think it's important to definitely have like goals and where you're heading, but I think measuring it defeats the purpose. Like, um, I think saying you need to do this amount of things or that amount of things to be spiritually enlightened or spiritually grounded, I find that kind of ridiculous. I think that there, of course, are guidelines with inside religions to identify that religion or that spiritual practice, but to say, oh, you need to, but to say you need to continuously measure your progress and inside of what you're doing, it just puts extra burdens and chains on it, you know? I say I'm going to do this small thing and I'm going to continue to do the small thing, and that's the end of it, you know? I say I'm going to pray every morning, I'm going to pray every night, and that's the end of it, you know?
and I think I kind of interpreted the question a little bit different. Um, I was hearing it of like, how do you measure, like if we switch it and we say physical, it's like, how can you tell how physically well you are, right? You can kind of check in with your body. So I think, yeah, I don't use a checkpoint of like, on like, how spiritual am I? Because I think I agree with Rain in that sense, but I do kind of look at like, well, how am I feeling? Because again, going back to it's all connected. Like am I tired? Are my emotions kind of low? Am I feeling hopeful or am I feeling anxious? Am I, have I been praying? Like when I'm like evaluating myself, I try to look at the whole and understand that it's all connected.
I agree with both of you guys again. Um, it's it's crazy. For me to measure my spirituality, I didn't understand what I was writing down. Again, I didn't understand what I was writing down when I asked that question. I was like, "What? How do you do it?" But then, hearing you guys, I think I measure my spirituality by making a routine for what I do, and sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't, and it doesn't make me more or less of a believer, but it's like it helps me maintain me. And also, I measure my spirituality based off of my friends. Sometimes I'll just text somebody like, "Hey, I need you to pray for me real quick. Pray for me." And next thing you know, I get a FaceTime call and we praying together. So I think that's sometimes how I measure it. I do it with others and I check in with myself, like Victoria said. So yeah.
This kind of, I'm curious, and if it's too personal, then please don't feel obligated to answer. But Rain mentioned kind of maybe like a, daily prayer practice. Aysha, you mentioned like kind of a willingness to reach out to others and engage in like shared. Are there other kind of practices or routines that you all have to nourish your spirit or your spirituality?
Well, as you can see, I veil. So veiling is covering your hair for religious or spiritual purposes. And I do that to always feel a connection with the divine creator and with the divine presence that's in my life. So that's one way that I'm daily practice my beliefs. I also have, you can't see it because I'm like in front of the camera, but I also have an altar space right there. So with that altar space is I always pray. That's where I do my morning prayer. Um, I keep my books, which I use to like research my religion. And thank you. I've been working so hard on it, and I feel really sad because I wasn't able to like take pictures of it before I lost my phone. So it's well, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing because I can like craft it better. But like I really wish I had been able to take pictures of it before losing my phone. But I pray there. I keep religious items there, such as my offering cup, because I give offerings to the our divine creator. I keep what else do I keep there? I keep my crystals there. My let's see here. I have a prayer book on there, a Baha'i prayer book. Even though I'm not Baha'i, I feel good energy from it, so I keep it on my altar. And those are the things I keep on there. And it's kind of like it helps me to have a focus, like have that place as a focus.
I think um another practicing, is, so I pray. Uh my cousins and my auntie, they gave me anointing oil, and my cousin anointed my dorm room before we left. And what's the other one? Oh, testimonies. And I think going back to like how do you measure your spirituality? Um, I write my own testimony sometimes because I had to realize what I've been through and how I'm different from today, and like how I changed, and and how I want to cry, but like how I like progress and things like that with my relationship with God and things like that. So yeah, hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, I really am inspired by that piece because I think I've mentioned in previous conversations that I journal, and I don't know if I ever thought about it in terms of like observing the changes within myself. So thank you for that.
Hey Aisha, do you ever kind of just start praying and then just feel like a sense of energy or a sense of calm overwash you?
Definitely, especially like when I'm going through what feels like the hardest time. Like I just step back, and when I pray, it's like I'm telling God whatever I'm going through, the hard, the bad, the worst, what I think could happen. And like when I say it, when you speak it, it feels like you being heard, and it's just like uplifts all that weight. And it kind of feels like, for me personally, it feels like him saying to me, "I got you, child. Like you don't have to worry no more. Let go, and I got it." What about you?
Strangely enough, every time I pray at night, I have a set prayer that I say every night, and I just feel like my body energizing piece by piece as I say the prayer. I repeat it 3 times before going to sleep, and I just feel like my body getting energized as I'm, like, strangely enough, falling asleep.
Yeah, I guess maybe I have a similar experience sometimes. Um, that like a calmness or a stillness. Um, sure, sure. Like I think of it sometimes in terms of like light is one way. Sometimes I think about it. Yeah. This conversation's making me feel that I should probably tighten up some of my practices.
I mean, I wouldn't say you'd have to like tighten them up. I think we're all on our own self-paced. I think that religion and spirituality should be self-paced, you know. Like outside influences shouldn't force us to feel like we need to do this or that when it comes to our spiritual practices. It's why I kind of have a little bit of an iffy feeling when somebody passes me a Bible, or when like I hear about religious converters, or like people who try to forcefully, or not, I wouldn't say forcefully, people who try to convert you. Like kind of like the feeling you get when a Jehovah Witness knocks on your door. Like you appreciate their kindness and niceness, but there is a certain line and boundary. And I feel like actively seeking to convert people because you feel like your religion is the only true religion, it makes me feel like it feels a little iffy to me.
Yeah, I can understand that, but I also respect the teachings of certain religions and faiths, that the teachings do say that, you know, if you really believe, then part of your responsibility is to share that. And you know, I guess that's really my beginning and end, is that I respect that does exist. That is part of some practices. There is a Jehovah Witness, you know, a group of them who come through my neighborhood periodically, and I've built up like a pretty good relationship. You know, I certainly wouldn't have not converted. You know, but it's become just now like human to human conversational. And of course, she is still carrying out what she feels is her responsibility based on her belief, but also just as two individuals, we can talk about relationships and children and whether, I will say it has not happened at all during COVID. And I'm actually curious how, you know, spiritualities and religions that do really prioritize that type of engagement, I wonder how they're responding right now when going and knocking on door to door is not really something that's as acceptable as it has been. Something to think about.
I agree with Rain on how like spirituality is a self-paced journey, and I want to share what my English teacher, my English 101 teacher, told me. So she told me, in our book that was assigned to us, I was very surprised to see it. It was excerpts of the Bible. I was like, what? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. We could do that here. And she was like, yeah, I recommend, and we read parts of the Bible and parts of, I don't know how to say the Buddhism book. I don't know the right word for it, so excuse me. But we read both of those, and she recommended us to read all religious books and to be aware of all religions and to understand that your religion isn't the only one, but to educate yourselves on others so you understand like certain norms and really learn more about your own spirituality. Because you don't have to be like fully religious or committed to a religion to be like, oh, I agree with X, Y, and Z. Just read more, like be open to all and learn something from it.
I feel like there should be a religions class in like schools, but I feel like it should be differently from what has been done in the past. So it shouldn't be, oh, we think that this religion is best to teach everyone. Let's teach them only this religion, but to open up a dialogue to where a whole bunch of religions are being taught, such as like Religions 101 class in college. You know, we don't see classes like that typically. I'm gonna speak for in South Carolina and in America until we reach college, and I think that that's an issue. You know.
And as I was listening, I was reminded of just the ways that religions and spiritualities also vary across cultures. So having a space like a Religion 101, like is often at the college level offered, having something like that is also a space for cross-cultural conversations. Yeah.
I hope hopefully there's going to be more classes as like we realize that there is just more than one way in race, really. Because if we teach people about different religions and other people's cultures, we'll have more respect for their spirituality and why they might practice certain things that you were taught was different or not normal. It'll like give you a better understanding on how to be a good human, as I would say.
I'm noticing a question in the notes about kind of the thoughts of a physical practice like yoga and Tai Chi as aspects of spiritual practice. Is that something that we wanted to talk about a little?
I would say yes. I feel like a lot of people in the like West, speaking specifically to Northern America, they I wouldn't say pull apart, but you know what? Yes, they pull apart the spiritual meanings of yoga from like its practices, such as like um, yogi teachings and Buddhism and Hinduism. I feel like they make it a purely physical practice. And that's all fine and dandy, but it should also be recognized that it's more than just moving and it's more than just moving your body to up your flexibility. It's moving meditation, you know? And I feel like that should be recognized more than it is.
So is, in that case, and I don't know the answer to this, so I really don't know the answer. Is meditation inherently linked with spirituality?
I would have to say my personal answer to that is yes. With meditation, it's about focusing in on something, whether that be your breath, mantra, which could be spiritual or religious within itself, or just taking yourself and putting yourself in that moment. And I feel like that has a spiritual element to it, you know?
I definitely agree with that because I don't know how, I don't want to offend anybody, but in the Bible it references finding the God within you. And when you meditate, like Rain said, you focus on you and you focus on your breathing and your mantra and things like that. So I would say yes.
I had a unique experience growing up through school. So I went to a school of the arts, and for our physical education credit in high school, we had the option to take yoga, not as a spiritual practice, but as an introduction to the poses and an introduction to some of the flows. Yeah. So, and I think I even remember even sometimes on like free Fridays, instead of, what would have been a ballet class, it's like, oh, well, it's free Friday. Would you all like to do, like a yoga flow for the day? And so at the time, I wasn't studying it as it related with any one spirituality or religious practice, but I absolutely felt enriched by learning, the stretches, the proper ways of being able to hold stretches and breathe safely without hurting myself. So I think I can understand it both ways because of that experience. But also I did go to school here in the West in America. And so that maybe is something that we have done to a practice that wasn't intended. I don't know.
I feel like as the West we do that a lot. Like it's not bad that you benefited from that practice, but I think that it should be a requirement to say, hey, this is where this comes from. This is where this comes from that you are learning. I feel like in a sense it's appropriation to not like say that, like to not say this is who has developed this thing you are learning. This is the concept and the context to what you are learning. I feel like that's in a sense appropriation.
And I can agree with that. And I can also understand that maybe one reason why they didn't do that is because I can imagine parents in some situations being outraged if they felt like it was any religion that was being, taught that was contrary to what, I could just see some parents not being able to understand, but I can also see that by not acknowledging the root, then that is at risk of appropriation. So I think that's a tough line.
Just quickly, I disagree with you, Victoria. I think that's the same thing as history of African Americans. It's not told enough in the history book of America. That's the same thing. We should always present where it comes from in 2 or 3 words. But I'm also wondering to what you were talking about. For me, meditation took over praying for a lot of people. When I was younger, praying was kind of meditation, especially if you were not super active religiously in many ways. But we were using that. It's time to pray, or go and pray. Let's be quiet. And meditation came as a more physical thing, a more relationship to the body for some roots and links, but also for medical purpose to relax the brain. So I think that's why it's lost. The connections, also historical connections of the practice have been lost because it's more medical and necessary for humans. Now it's considered like that. And especially when it becomes also a practice that can be sold, help with medication and everything like that, all the origin, the spiritual origins of it have tendency to disappear.
So what do you think about the practice that I've read about it being implemented in other cities where instead of like a detention or an in-school suspension at school, they have like a meditation corner?
I personally think it's good as something that self-control. And during that time, I suspect there is always a little subject or a little words or something to help your meditation go. It could be showing origins or, go different ways. But I think it's good for self-control of yourself, yes. I guess. I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I'm all for it as long as context is given. I mean, meditation, you can find that meditation is in many religions, but context should still be given. It shouldn't be saying this is a purely physical practice when it has other things attached to it. So if they're like, hey, this is how you meditate, this is meditation, and here's some context to it, I'm all down for it. I think it's a really I think it's beneficial, and I think in some cases it's necessary, Kind of like how we were talking about with emotional health. I think that this would help with emotional health on top of physical health and spiritual health. So it's a practice that has multiple benefits to multiple health systems within the body.
I definitely agree because under like spiritual health, it helps you understand what schools may call issues like the behavior issues or issues and just and your social issues like they call social issues. But it's like when you teach somebody, when you're not having a good day or like when you are having like a case of ADHD, um not a case, but like experience your experience with having ADHD and ADD, you're not a bad person. You're not a bad child or a bad student. But here's some ways to react to it or like how to calm down and things like that. So when you teach somebody, it's not bad. It's like, I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's like you're removing the need of discipline, like saying, oh, you're bad, you're doing this, you shouldn't be doing this, now you're in detention forever. How about let's do something positive by meditating and show you something different?
Yeah, it's a learning process also. It's another tool you give to someone instead of a pill, in a way, if we talk about ADD.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I was referencing when I talked about the experience that I had at my high school. It was like, even though I wasn't going, it wasn't like a religious school, I did feel that I was getting some tools from it that I still carry with me.
I think also the more we learn about the world, all those things are part of what we should learn, not just through the politics and how people are different from us or what, but also what has been brought to the human race as possibilities, to communicate differently, and differently with all our interrogations. So I guess part of our spiritual life is to go through our interrogations in multiple ways. Yeah. I remember when I was maybe in my past 15-year-old, let's say, between 15 and 25, maybe, I was interested in looking at all the religion of the world, mostly Buddhism and Krishnamurti. And there was all those people walking in Paris, Hare Krishna. I wanted to know more about them. Hinduism, Muslim, and even France was mostly Catholic until the late 60s. So even all the other Christian religions, what was the difference? And I got kind of annoyed by the fact how there are all those religious wars that really kind of drove me to look at it more in historical ways than more in practical ways to become the best human being possible. But in a way, the earth becomes smaller. The globe is smaller for all of us. We can travel more and through online more. So we have so much more to learn in a way, but access to those learning possibilities with maybe trying to develop a critical, some doubts, not about maybe the religion, each religion as a whole, but about in looking at the small parts more than putting religions in competition.
How do you feel spiritual health other impact other aspects of your life and or influence your other house?
I would say it helped me to prioritize my mental health. So funny story, um, I was in a Discord server related to learning about religion and other like different religions. And I was like, something weird just happened to me. And they're like, go see a doctor. Because sometimes we conflate like spiritual or religious signs. Spiritual or religious signs can be conflated with just plain mental and physical things that are happening with you. I feel like that's happened a lot in history. And we have now gotten to the point where we said, okay, yeah, spiritual things and religious things can happen to you, but go to a doctor, go to a therapist first before you diagnose it as this thing. And I feel like that helped me because I had been procrastinating on scheduling with a therapist to like help me with some mental things going on in my brain. And after that, I was like, I think I'll do that. And then I did.
Yep. And I think I would just say that for me, it's the same thing I said earlier. For me, I feel that it's all linked and not that one is necessarily ever the answer to the other, but I try to look at things as they're all interconnected. It all needs to be, nurtured and studied and yeah. So for me, it's all connected.
for me, we cannot avoid to have an interest in spirituality as much as in materiality, except it's not always pushing us as much as materiality, like surviving is. It's not as close to us all the time. But I don't always link spirituality to practice of a religion. I think practice of art, and especially things that are close to poetry or imagining, sometimes are more floating on the ground than anchored in the ground. And that's what allows us, in a way, to use the word creation, creativity in what we are doing, although even those words were first kept for who created the world and how the world was created. So I think spirituality is one way to imagine bigger, see bigger, float, fly, and communicate in many different ways, receive different types of communication, make sense of our dreams or nightmares at night, feel that you could live underwater, swimming underwater for 1 hour and not 2 minutes. You know, things that may not be totally real, but are become as big as the universe. And then maybe you catch something, and I mean, no, it's not clear what I'm saying, but yeah. But yeah, I see that close to poetry, in the larger sense of poetry. So that is a necessity. Yeah.
We would like to thank you all for being a part of today's discussion. We really appreciate that you all have taken time out of your day to be a part of this conversation.
Alrighty, I think we are about to wrap up this recording. Is there any last thoughts or reflections that anyone would like to share?
Maybe we could. What's the last of the 5 healths that we'll be talking about?
Our last health is social health.
I'm sorry, I could not hear you. What did you say?
Our last health that we're going to be talking about is social health.
Alrighty, I am going to end out the recording. Do you live in Charleston or the greater area? Well, if you do, we'd love for you to host a future episode of I Like My Tea Suite, a podcast about issues and topics surrounding our communities. For more information or to offer suggestions, email TINYisPOWERFUL@gmail.com. You can also respond or add to today's conversation about spiritual health by sending your thoughts via the Something to Share section of TINYisPOWERFUL.com.
Bet on your tiny, tiny castle. Bet on your tiny, tiny dream. Bet on your tiny, tiny businesses. Bet on, bet on, bet on, bet on you. Bet on, bet on, bet on, bet on you. Why you bet on strangers? Strangers pass on through. You should bet on neighbors, cause neighbors bet on you. Your tiny, tiny barbershop. Bet on you. Oh, your tiny, tiny beauty shop. Bet on you. Oh, your tiny, tiny auto shop. Bet on you. Yeah, your tiny, tiny flower shop. Bet on you. You need to bet on them just like they bet on you. You need to bet on them just like they bet on you. They bet sweat on your sweat, child. They bet their heart on your heart now. They bet their life on your life, child. They bet their house on your house, child. You need to bet on them just like they